Good evening. So I have to say it's a little bit surreal for a Tar Heel to be standing up here in front of all these single Wildcats, double Wildcats, triple Wildcats, but congratulations. I finally tore down my homemade 2017 NCAA men's basketball champion poster on my office. Actually, as I was walking out the door, I lose track of what day it is, but yesterday, I guess on my way here, or I'm thinking about this event, I thought, well, I guess I need to take this down now. So great for the city, great for all of you, so congratulations. This is really an honor to be up here and talk about my public administration journey. And that's not really a pithy title. It is fairly descriptive of what to this point has been a journey I never could have predicted, and certainly one I never planned. So I'll apologize in advance. I'm a little bit of a nonlinear thinker, and as a result, a nonlinear speaker. The highest praise I ever got from, and I've had the opportunity to teach in MPA programs before, the highest praise I ever got from a student was, we had no idea where you were going for about 10 weeks, and then it all came together. So we don't have that long, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to tie everything together at the end. So just hang on, and I won't be afraid. We'll have time for questions, and also just feel free to throw a hand up and if I lose you at any point. So I played football in high school, was not good enough to play football in college, and although I could have probably done Division II or III, but I didn't want to get injured. And the reason I didn't want to get injured is because I had it in my mind when I left high school and went off to college that I wanted to serve in some way. And I didn't know what that was. I think I thought at the time it would be military service, so I was hoping to be a Marine Corps officer at some point in my career. And as I started out college as a history major, basically so I could keep a high grade point average, in case I would go to graduate school someday, people ask all the time, how did you become a firefighter? 2 words, Taco Bell. And we were driving around one day and went past a Taco Bell, and I'd grown up in Chicago, so I had never seen a volunteer fire department before. I didn't know that was something that existed. So I'm not one of those kids who grew up wanting to be a firefighter. I saw the occasional television show, I had the Tonka trucks, but it's not something I ever wanted to do. Astronaut, pilot, on and on and on, but not firefighter. So went to the Taco Bell, and leaving the Taco Bell, we made a right instead of a left and drove past a volunteer firehouse that said, volunteer here, become an emergency medical technician. And at the time, again, I thought military career, I was a big scuba diver. I thought, well, that'd be a great skill to have. And I walked in, didn't know anything, submitted my application, and was told, well, the EMT class doesn't start for a couple weeks. So here's a helmet and some what we call bunker gear, which is actually the coat that we put on, or as my mother still calls it 26 years later, my costume. So there, my costume and my helmet, and I literally got my first call, took my first ride on a fire truck, and I was hooked. That was it. I was done. So this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Took a couple semesters off from college, thanks to AP courses. How many of you advanced placement courses? Best money you'll ever spend. So thanks to the APs, I took a couple semesters off. And really at that point I thought, well, I'll finish school later and I'll become a career firefighter now. I was encouraged by my parents, who of course were horrified. My parents, what do you want to be when you grow up? Doctor, lawyer, pharmaceutical salesperson, that's something my mother kept bringing up, author. They were certainly horrified when I talked about the Marine Corps. I think the only thing that was more horrifying to my parents was becoming a firefighter. And I vividly remember my mother saying, why would you do that? Why would you risk your life to save other people. Why can't somebody else do that? Why you? You should be a lawyer. You should do this or that. I said, Mom, somebody has to do it. And it's what we do. And I love my mother. She's a wonderful woman, and this story ends later too. But to me, that was pretty much, in a nutshell, that certainly hardened my resolve to make the fire and emergency services my career. So when I graduated from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, I applied for a number of fire departments, and I was hired in Fairfax County, Virginia, which at the time, for folks in the fire and emergency services, the two most progressive places on the planet were thought to be Fairfax County, Virginia, of course right outside DC, and Phoenix, Arizona. So didn't really want to go to Phoenix. I had grown up in Chicago, but the East Coast, I had a lot of friends and family around in Virginia and North Carolina, so I thought this is a good place to be. And worked there for a few years, and that was really the last time I had a career plan, was when I started as a firefighter in Fairfax County, Virginia. Because what was attractive to me about the job, certainly saving lives and protecting property, but also getting paid to, and Frank can attest to this, firefighters actually get paid to break things and smash things and cut things. So for me, it was the wonderful things about the job were really that you could be outside. At one point I thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I just can't handle being inside that much. So to me it was this combination of being able to be out there and actually doing things and helping people where they live, being in their homes, being in their neighborhoods, being out in the street helping people. And this other idea that you could never know enough. There was always something new to learn, because our profession, what we do, is affected by so many other areas of policy, and that'll come up again too. So it's a lot more than, it's not like the TV shows. I've never seen any of those television shows. I've never seen Chicago Fire or the new one or the other new one. It's not like that, but what is like that is the rewarding nature of it and the rewarding nature of that service. So after a few years in Fairfax, when I thought, I'd stay there for 20, 25 years, get my retirement, and then maybe become a fire chief somewhere else. At one point early in my career, it was made clear to me that if I got injured as a firefighter, one of the things the workers' compensation folks would do is they would potentially find you a job if you could no longer be a firefighter and do all those fun and rewarding things I mentioned before. They might get you a job doing something else in government. And I didn't necessarily want to do anything else that might come up that was equivalent to being a firefighter. So I thought I probably should go continue my education. I have absolutely no idea how I ended up in the MPA program at George Mason University. Don't know why I picked an MPA. I'm sure I probably looked at a magazine and saw some kind of job announcement and saw MPA. It was, without question, maybe the most consequential decision that I've made in my entire life, including my personal life, because it has affected more years of my life than probably any other decision, and certainly affected my career trajectory and in a positive way. So I went to school. All firefighters have part-time jobs. We get days off. We earn the days off, but we do get days off. So I was going to school, getting my MPA, and my part-time job became consulting, and actually started off as government consulting, working for some federal government clients. So that's what I would do on my days off. Went to school, did consulting. And I'll never forget my first day in our foundations, I don't know what it's called at Villanova, but our foundational class for the MPA program is PUAD 502, Foundations of, aptly named, Foundations of Public and Not-for-Profit Administration. And we had at the time, this was when tenure was really tenure. We had a very salty professor. His name was Brack Brown, and forgive me, I'm gonna say it just like he did. So, this is the first night. This is our indoctrination into the world of public administration. So I'm sitting there, and he's sort of soft-spoken, and then he's talking about what it means to get an MPA and what public administration means. And he worked himself up to a fever pitch, and he said, "Don't ever let me hear you tell somebody at the start of a conversation that you have your MPA or that you're an MPA. Because if you're worth a damn, they'll figure it out on their own." And to me, that has stuck with me. I mean, I still hear it every day. His point obviously was to certainly take the learning, but not to necessarily wear it on your sleeve. And when I then had, again, this surreal experience to go back and teach that class a number of years later, I used the same quote. So kudos to all of you for making that choice. While I was there in Fairfax, I was walking out of work one day, and we had a new governor appointed in Virginia, and I was asked at the ripe old age of 27 if I would be interested in being a state agency head. So being the head of the state agency for fire protection in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I laughed and I said, "Yeah, sure, right. Ha ha. Well, sure, throw my hat in the ring." The lesson there is, don't laugh, don't throw your hat in the ring if you're not ready to pick it back up, put it on, and go to work. So I actually went and worked my last shift as a firefighter shortly after 9/11. Drove down to Richmond, which is the state capital, and put on a suit and went to work on the 18th floor of a high-rise office building. And I had somebody crying by 2 hours later. I didn't make them cry, but one of our employees came in and was crying. And along the way I had also started a PhD program in public policy on 9/11, so I missed the first class. And I started a bachelor's degree in chemistry, but I had my MPA. And I was thrown into state government. And I had all of these horrific ideas of what that would mean. I thought people would be calling me all the time for political favors, to ask for things, to ask me to do unethical things, or whatever these visions were that I had. I went to my boss at the time, who was the Secretary of Public Safety, and I said, "Sir, you know what? I didn't get a lot of guidance coming into this. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, you wouldn't be here if we didn't think you knew what to do. So go do that, and make sure we never get blindsided." So it was pretty much go do that, and don't get blindsided. And I can tell you, had it not been for that MPA, I would have just been, I'd be back on a fire truck. Because that preparation, and I did actually call, about 6 months into the job, I called the fire chief at Fairfax at the time, and I went through this whole litany of issues. I said, they want me to completely transform this agency that has a statewide mission. We don't have enough people. They told me I have to cut my budget by 15%, but we don't. We have plenty of money, but since everybody else is doing it, we have to cut it too. I said, this is impossible. We can't, I can't do this. So what do they want? And I was getting ready to ask for my job back, and he said, if it was easy, you wouldn't like it. I said, "Thanks, Chief." Hung up the phone, and away we went. And had a lot of success in that job. And what was really gratifying to me was to come back then, when I went back into state government 10 or 12 years later, and see that some of the things we had started, and that agency then fell under my portfolio when I was a Deputy Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. Some of the things we had done in our strategic planning process were just coming to fruition 10 to 12 years later, or we were still on that path. Or people would say, this is something that started when you were here. That was very gratifying. The only reason I had a clue what to do in that job and in many subsequent jobs was because of that MPA. And specifically because of the courses that I hated or I thought I was going to hate. I remember my first day of accounting class. public accounting. Well, I'm glad I know what GASB accounting standards are now. And I'm glad I can talk about what is a public and a private good. And I'm very glad in the era of big data that I was forced to take 2 semesters of statistics. And actually, I liked it so much that I went on to get or work on 1 PhD and then another PhD and, same dissertation, 2 doctoral programs. Someday I'll finish. But it really is those experiences that you have. And what I came to find out was the folks that run these programs and put them together actually do kind of know what they're doing. And it was really important preparation and certainly helped me be successful in that. I went to Arizona for a few years as a deputy fire chief, went back to Alexandria, Virginia as the fire chief. Along the way, I was appointed by President Bush to be a special government employee for FEMA as a member of the National Fire Academy Board of Visitors. I was reappointed by President Obama. I went to work then for another governor in Virginia, the recently former governor, Terry McAuliffe. And the reason I mention their names is because, I had these opportunities because I am a public administrator, and I proudly wear that badge. The fact that I'm a fire commissioner or a fire chief is merely interesting. I proudly wear the title of public administrator. I'm a proud bureaucrat. I tell people that. I tell our firefighters, you're a street-level bureaucrat, and just watch their heads explode. What do you mean? No, I'm not. Bureaucrats are bad. Well, then, no. Bureaucracy, public administration. I believe in the difference between politics and administration, and I believe that public administrators have an important place as a bridge between those 2 worlds, and sometimes as a firewall between those 2 worlds. And I think now more than ever, what you are learning and what public administrators are doing is important. And again, that's a nonpartisan statement. When you look at the challenges that we're facing, the wicked policy problems, and of course in Philadelphia, and I love Philadelphia. It's a wonderful city. I can tell you, my grandmother and grandfather met here off their respective boats. They were immigrants. Off their respective boats. My grandfather was a ship captain on the Delaware River before he ended up down in Virginia. Still have, every now and then I'll have cousins. Apparently I have a lot of cousins still around here in Philadelphia. So it kind of skipped a generation, but for somebody who grew up in Chicago, it's a very comfortable city. Love the neighborhoods, love the community, and frankly, warts and all, I love the way our city works. Because again, if it was easy, anybody could do it. And I can tell you that for a public administrator, and again, having worked in 5 states, done a variety of different jobs, a lot of different domains, there is no more rewarding place to do our work, to serve, than where people need help the most. I did not anticipate ever being here. I'm the first outside fire commissioner since Ben Franklin. And people say, well, Ben Franklin was from here. Well, actually, he was from Boston. Ben Franklin moved here at 17. He was really from Boston. So, Union Fire Company, I'm the first outside fire commissioner since Ben. And, that is certainly meaningful to me. It's never something I expected. I was on my way over to, when I was very close to this happening, I was actually flying over to the Middle East to visit troops, because one of my agencies in my last job was the National Guard, and we have had a lot of people deployed overseas. Before I left, I thought, maybe I should go just in case, because of course everything was supposed to be confidential, just in case. I probably should go tell the governor. So I went down the hall. I felt terrible. A, I loved my job. B, I felt like I was leaving a little bit early at 2 years and change. And of course in Virginia, governors cannot be reappointed, so it wasn't that early. I wasn't sure what would happen when I sat down and said, Governor, I'm thinking about this opportunity in Philadelphia as the fire commissioner. And he looked at me and he said, without missing a beat, you're a firefighter. You have to go do that. And he couldn't have been more right. I loved working at the state level. I like working at the federal level. But local government, that's where my heart is. That's where things really happen. And again, you can't discount all of the important players in this federalism construct that we have, that certainly is being, tested isn't really the right word, but certainly, we're learning about, everybody is learning about what you've already learned about how our government works and how the Constitution works, and sometimes, frankly, how it doesn't work. And folks are learning the difference between government and governance, and that's more than a semantic distinction. And I am very thankful that I'm able to have conversations like that now as I embark on my soon third year in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. And I can tell you from my experiences out in the streets of Philadelphia, that's not just a tagline. I go everywhere in the city, 24/7, 365. So I'll be down in South Philly or Southwest Philly or North Philly or West Philly at a fire scene, and I'll go walk up on somebody's porch and start asking about smoke alarms. And first, when I first got here, folks would look at me and they'd say, well, you're the new fire commissioner. You're from Virginia, right? I said, well, I work there, but I grew up in Chicago. Oh, okay then. You understand Philly then. But everybody has been so gracious and so open-minded and so welcoming, and I can tell you, while certainly coming from the outside and having had the variety of experiences and education that I've had, and certainly doing consulting has been a pretty important part of my background too, in terms of being able to use different lenses. That lens metaphor that we all, that's important, and being able to apply those different lenses. So that's been critical to me. But this city now is in a place where we're on the rise. At the same time, we have a lot of work left to do, and a lot of work to do together. So let me give you talk a little bit about the fire department. You heard some of this. So this is a little bit of what we deal with on a daily basis. Again, it's not like the television show. You can see our incident trends. It's funny, when I got here, folks said, well, you must be happy to be here. We don't have a lot of fires in Philadelphia. I said, well, we had 14 on my first day, but I don't know. And actually, if you look at the data, and I did this myself, I still know how to do it. Learned that in an MPA class. And I was actually, the genesis of this presentation was for an international conference. So I was looking at world statistics, and you can see there our structure fire experience in Philadelphia much higher than any other city in the world for which I could find data. Why is that? Well, we sort of track with all of the other policy issues that you see in the urban realm. When I started my PhD in public policy, I sat down with the program director. We were having an event kind of like this to get everybody onboarded. And he said, why would a firefighter be interested in public policy? I said, well, because we're sort of at the intersection of when all of the policy prescriptions fail, whether it's telecommunications policy, whether it's urban planning, whether it's transportation policy, on and on and on. We're kind of there in the middle. And with our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, and frankly, as I've learned over the years, everybody else who works in state, local, and federal government. Because it's a system, it's a network. And we all have to work together, and we're all part of it. We all have equities and interests. And the other thing that I learned very early on, and again, this is due to my MPA, this notion of speaking truth to power. Aaron Vildovsky had a book of that name, and it's been something that I swore that I would do. I believe I actually took an oath, saying, I believe I've taken an oath quite a few times to speak truth to power. But I swore when I became a state agency head that I would always be candid, open, honest, and that I would always remember where the power resides. And that power is with our citizens. That power is with the people who are the owners, operators of our system. And it's funny, I said that once at an off-the-record event here to some media folks, and I said, you're speaking truth to power, that's you. And they said, well, we look at you as being the power. I said, well, we should talk about that. So to me, this has been a really unique opportunity here in this great city to do that, to help people understand and help calibrate their willingness to pay for certain things, help understand what that means, and to truly be able to be involved in what we like to say is a fight, and it's fire is everyone's fight. That's what we talk about, because there are so many different variables, so many different things that everybody can do. So that is kind of my 20-minute or less public administration journey, and hopefully I said enough times that had it not been for that MPA that I sort of stumbled into, I wouldn't be here today, and certainly I would not have had the opportunity to serve with so many great people across the country that I've had as part of this, still open book as we go forward. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm happy to take a couple questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Thiel. I'm going to ask a couple of graduate students going to come up and help with some microphones. We have some time for questions. So I'm going to hand this over to you guys.
And I really believe in that speak truth to power thing, so I'll pretty much say anything.
Any questions?
And we don't know each other, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is John Cobell. I'm a current MPA student here. I'll be completing my studies at the end of this year. I'm also a firefighter in Annual County, and have found tremendous value in the program already. Can't wait till it's completed. And one of my favorite classes that I've taken so far has been the urban politics class, and we learned quite a bit about race relations and the impact of government on race relations throughout the course of our country. And I had read that you had quite a problem with race relations within your department, and when you took over, and that you have really turned relations around within your department. And one of the key takeaways that I remember from that program was a short video that we watched about race relations in Detroit, and there was a community leader that said, there's no magic pill, and nothing is going to change it overnight. What it's going to take is a series of very small conversations between people. And I think from everything that I've read and what I've heard about you, that is exactly what you have done. And I was wondering if you could share with us what the secret of your success has been. Thank you.
No, thank you, and thanks for your service. Well, I think it's too soon to declare anything a success. And frankly, it's work that never ends, because really what it's about dialogue, and it's about relationships. And I tell people, if you stop working on a relationship, it's not a relationship anymore. I mean, relationships take work, and I learned that in my personal life the hard way. But it's the same thing in what we do professionally. I had the opportunity yesterday. Brandon Graham, number 55 for the Philadelphia Eagles, came by, stopped by our office, and I also wore number 55 in high school. So we were talking about, and I also started at middle linebacker and then became a defensive end. So we were talking about football and teamwork in life. I said, people ask sometimes what sports meant to you. And to me, what you learn as a middle linebacker is the cardinal sin of a middle linebacker. And if you watch football, you'll see this. You never take a step back. Your first step, it doesn't matter what the play is. Even if you're going to end up running backwards into pass coverage, you always step forward. It's always forward. Always engage. So I can tell you, breaking it down, I have lots of people who have meetings or want to talk to me or have issues. And sometimes I think, oh, I really don't want to have that conversation today or right now. And whenever I think that, that's exactly the time to go have that conversation, to weigh in. You know, the management by walking around stuff, coalition building, you know, building networks, maintaining networks, community building. It's really all the things, frankly, it's just been doing what I've learned, starting with my MPA, on to public policy, public administration doctorates. It's all the stuff. I've just been doing all the things that you're learning in these classes and trying to stay current, you know, staying current with the literature. I still stay current because some of those, you know, we've evolved. You know, I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is no longer contemporary. There've been a couple additions to that, but so you got to stay current, but it really has just been that. It's been engaging, it's been community building, it's been dialogue, and it's something that is constant, and frankly, it's something that you have to keep. So one of the other things I really remember from my MPA was, it was probably the first edition of James Q. Wilson's Bureaucracy. Everybody, people still read that? So I remember that, the point of that book, the point of Wilson's book was, here are several organizations that at one point were considered down on their luck or they were not high-performing organizations. And now they're high-performing organizations. 25 years later, literally those same organizations have been, and one of them was the FBI. And whatever you think, it simply is just looking at the FBI and where it is, you know, how it is held or how much it's in the news. So you can see this kind of ebb and flow of organizations, which is a long way of saying, as soon as you think you've gotten there, as soon as you think you're done, well, it's either time to leave or it's time to start again. Because that's just not, this work is never done. And it's never, I love the, you know what you said, I went into another fire department and we were doing a lot of dialogue stuff, and even I just heard the other day, all that soft stuff, but, and this gentleman stood up and he said, you know, Chief, this is all great, but I want to see the big lightning strike. When is the big lightning strike coming? I said, well, it's not going to be that way. It's going to be a series of small lightning strikes. And just wait, because yours will come. So, thank you for the question. Hopefully I did answer it.
Commissioner, thanks so much for your words. My name is Thiel. I'm an alumnus of the program, 2014. I also work in the Mayor's Office of Education. So one of the things to piggyback off of your question is diversity. So Mayor Kenny talks a lot about diversity in his administration and really ensuring that the city reflects the constituency. And so my question, again, to build off of that is, what are the steps that you're taking in your department to ensure that your department is reflecting the racial component of the city that we serve?
No, I appreciate that, and I would expand diversity and inclusion to include not just racial components, but gender, sexual orientation, diversity in all the ways that we can think of it. But certainly in Philadelphia, it often, you know, that conversation becomes about race and ethnicity. So I think part of it is ensuring that we don't lose sight of race and ethnicity as being an important dimension of diversity, but also recognize that there are other facets of it. And to me, I think certainly it is important to make sure that for our agencies to be credible, for our folks to be credible as street-level bureaucrats, whatever they do, out in the street, you know, we have to be able to engage with people, meet them where they live, and be able to communicate. At the same time, I think there is, if it's the right thing to do from an ethical and a moral standpoint, I also think there's a cold, hard business case that's been articulated in many studies, many studies, about the importance of diverse teams for any organization. And you all have probably read some of these studies. I mean, this is not, you know, nobody's making this up. Anybody know, and you probably do, but quick quiz, anybody know what the #1 indicator of a high-performing team is? What's the most important thing if you want to have a high-performing team? Maybe, but that's downstream. This is as simple as, what do people look like? Or what do we think they look like, which is another part of the conversation. It's women. It's having more women on your team. I mean, there are multiple studies about this. And ultimately, what does that boil down to? And again, you need to be careful with some of these things. With more stuff I learned in MPA and PhD programs, you don't want to generalize, but these are academic studies, and the idea or the theory is that women tend to have a higher emotional intelligence quotient than men. And again, this is just what the studies say. You can, just look them up, high-performing teams, women, and your favorite search engine, and you'll get that. But so for me, the first way that I did that is with my own executive team, which happens to be 50% women. We're diverse in every other respect. And, you got to convince people of this, though. I actually had somebody talking to me yesterday who said, well, because we're trying to get this idea of having diverse teams down through the organization. And somebody said, well, so-and-so wants to have a team, but can't find, we can't find any more XYZ people. We don't have any more XYZs. I said, we don't need any more XYZs. We need ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. When I'm building a team, the last thing I need is another person who looks like me, thinks like me, comes from or has my perspective. I need different lenses that I can't bring to the table. But this is a contemporary conversation. This was yesterday. We need to be filling the room with folks who are different than us in every respect. And it doesn't matter where that is or what we're doing. And there's plenty of academic literature, plenty of journal articles to back that up. So I think we're kind of starting at the top. At the same time, we have a lot of things we have to do around recruiting and hiring. So we've been doing a lot more with recruiting. One of my proudest moments was we had a billboard with all women Philadelphia Fire Department members on it. And they were diverse in every respect, and they all happened to be women. So that is important to be able to ensure that folks, wherever they live, whatever they're doing, that they can see themselves in our organization, or we're not going to be successful recruiting. So it kind of goes back to the same question. You got to be everywhere all the time doing everything. It's almost that simple. So thanks for the question. But it is critically important.
My name is Devin Stewart. I'm a graduate of Villanova MPA program in 2016. Also from the Philadelphia area, so welcome to the city.
Thank you.
I love the city, and I also have my father and grandfather were firefighters, so very nice. I think I can, with all the other municipal or local government workers here, we can all say that one of the things we love about our jobs is that every day is different. When you come into work, you're not going to do the same thing every day. You're faced with different challenges. So my question to you is, what is the biggest challenge that you faced in your role as the commissioner in the city of Firefighter?
I appreciate that. I get that question a lot. The biggest challenge is that there is prioritizing, because there are so many things that need to be done. The fire department, for a variety of reasons, has not necessarily been doing business according to contemporary practices and standards and with contemporary equipment and vehicles for a long time. So that's been a difficult conversation for us. I think the number one, and again, I would reframe that as an opportunity. Again, another thing I learned in an MPA class at some point. But the biggest opportunity, the number one thing that we're doing, that I've been doing, is speaking truth to power and helping folks understand what we do, how we do it. And nobody has a, you can't answer anybody with fire folks in your family. Anybody know what a one-alarm fire is? What's a one-alarm fire? What shows up on a one-alarm fire? What do you think? It's not a trick question. You're not being graded. One truck, right? That's what I get that answer all over the city. One truck. Generally folks say, well, it's the fire engine, which is that. And on the second alarm, what do you get? 2 trucks, right? Generally, you get another one of those. And then somebody said it over here. On the third alarm, you get the ladder truck, or the bendy truck, as people sometimes call it. Well, the reality is that one alarm fire is 4 fire engines, 2 ladder trucks, 2 battalion chiefs, an ambulance, and if we're outside of Philly, it actually would be another fire engine and then what we call a special service company, which is a heavy rescue or a squad company. So you need to have 16 to 24 people, depending on the type of occupancy, on scene with all of their kit and all of their gear and all of their vehicles to be able to effectively address a fire emergency like you see here. So that is the first thing. The first thing is and has been speaking truth to power, helping to educate folks about what we do and how we do it. Because if you ask a typical firefighter, and this is the thing I love about the Philadelphia Fire Department, because on paper it shouldn't work. I mean, on paper you look at what we have and the resources and the demand, it shouldn't work. And I've heard every single day, because every day is different, every single day since I've been there, our folks will say, they'll shrug and they'll say, it's what we do, we make it work. And they do. And I honor them for it. And frankly, it's been the biggest thing for me being here is besides having maybe some different perspectives and lenses, it's been that I can appreciate the Philadelphia Fire Department in a way that people who've worked here can't. Because they are literally folks who are doing the impossible. Our firefighters go into buildings that in any other place that I've worked, nobody would ever go inside those buildings because of the condition of the buildings, the appearance of the buildings, or they would say, well, it's a vacant building because it probably has a big thing on it saying it's supposed to be vacant. I haven't been to a vacant building fire yet since I've been here. They all have people living in them. And, firefighters, again, more academic research, defy all of the theories of public safety or public service motivation. And we saw that on 9/11. Nobody estimated whether or not they were going to die in that incident when they made the decision to go into the towers. Our folks are doing the same thing. And for me, what we're doing is helping everybody understand what that means. And to do that, it's really just been leveraging all the things that I've learned in a career, in a journey that has been affected more than anything else by my MPA. So keep it up. Thank you. God bless, and check your smoke alarms.
So we want to thank Commissioner Thiel for coming out this evening for a wonderful conversation. Thanks for actually mentioning all of the scholars from the field of public administration. It's a good, good thing to recall. So in appreciation for his speech tonight, which I think we're all going to be able to process and think through, we'd like to give him a Villanova sweatshirt if you deign to wear it. And please wear it when you're out in the public. No.